we're 6 months into the ownership of this Africa Twin now. I got it on April the 21st, I think it was, and we're pretty much there in October now, so it seems like a good time to do a 6-month review, if you want to call it that. I've covered just under 3,000 miles now, so I've used it a fair bit. Ridden in all sorts of weathers, ridden in good weather, bad weather, hot weather, cold weather. Faster roads, slower roads, mountains, cities, everything really. And now I've covered 6 months, I think it's fair time to start qualifying my opinion on this, which might surprise a few people. And also draw a relationship between this and the Fireblade, which is a weird comparison, but we'll get there. Let's get the elephant out of the room then. I really don't think the build quality of this is on par with bikes from, I'm going to say 20 years ago, sort of 2004, 2005 era. The reason why I say that is things like panel gaps, particularly around here. It's different on either side of the bike. The fittings around some of the plastic covers, although it's fine, and compared to lots of modern bikes it's not too different. Certainly compared to bikes, you know, 20, perhaps for sort of 15 years ago. It just doesn't seem to be that meticulously finished. I've not had any problems, nothing's broken, nothing's come undone, nothing's caused any issues as such, but certainly when you compare it to other bikes from a few years ago, I don't think that the quality is there. But what worries me more than that is that this is the more premium end of the market now. You know, this full price would have been over £21,000, which is to me a lot of money. The engineering is beyond doubt. You know, these have got many tens of thousand miles. There's a couple that have been clocked already, according to my local Honda dealer, with no mechanical issues at all, and I don't doubt that in any way. Just, you know, routine maintenance, 2 oil filters in these, by the book servicing, and they'll go on and on and on. DCT doesn't cause any problems in terms of maintenance, so that's really not an issue. So we'll do them on traditional front to back then. 21-inch wheel, no problems for me. The tyres are not fantastic. These are the factory fit Bridgestone AX41Ts. They're a dealer specific tyre, so when you get your brand new Honda, it will come with these fitted, if it's a UK market bike. And if you replace these AX41s with market AX41s, you'll get the superior version. Tyres are not fantastic. They're okay in sort of normal riding, but when you start to push on a bit, particularly 2 up, they do struggle. In the wet, they're not fantastic. Off-road, I'm probably not the best person to give that opinion. I'm not very skilled off-road. They cope with what I do, but certainly when you start to push on a little bit, they are not a patch on the A41s which I had on my Cross Taurus. So when these wear out, which won't be very long, I'll be going back to A41s rather than the X, which is more off-road biased. Brakes, strangely, I think I may have glazed the pads over. I don't tend to be very hard on the brakes, and the brakes seem to be getting not quite as good as they were when I first got the bike, so that's probably my fault in the fact I'm very gentle on the brakes, and now there's a very slight squeal on them under hard braking. Tried cleaning the discs, tried cleaning the calipers off thoroughly, and it's still slightly there. It doesn't bother me at all. It's one of those things, under hard braking you do get a slight squeal from the disc, but that's not a problem with the bike. It's just perhaps a bit of dirt in there, or perhaps a bit of sinter in the pad starting to show through, but nothing really to complain about. The power's excellent, you just have to give it a bit of a pull. Nice and progressive. You want one finger braking, you know, just puts a bit of stability in the bike, and the full kick count, the full 4 fingers should really stop, and you'll get the indicators flashing to indicate you're stopping hard. The suspension is again really impressive me on this bike. It's the main reason I got the Africa Twin over the NT, which interestingly the 2025 NT now comes with optional ESA, and I think that's going to do the sales even more good, because that was the deciding factor for me between the two. The suspension in every mode makes a big difference. I tend to use either touring mode or urban mode. You'll find in urban mode that when you corner quite hard, you'll get a bit of a wallow on the suspension, a bit of a movement in the bike. It's not a problem, nothing's moving around in terms of grip, it's just where the damping's all softened off, it does feel a bit different. So if I'm two up, I'll tend to use touring. If I'm on my own, just taking it easy, I'll use urban. And with the ESA, of course, you can adjust the preload as well when you're at a standstill. One thing I have noticed with the ESA and the rider modes, if you try to change modes at high speed, say 60 miles an hour, into a road where the ABS mode changes between on and off, you'll get the warning symbol on the dashboard, the little ABS symbol will flash. If you're at a lower speed, you can change between ABS on and off, or off-road and on-road mode as they call it, without any issues. That's just something I noticed just yesterday actually. But the electronic suspension is, for me, it's absolutely fantastic, and I think it's the biggest advantage that I found with this bike over the other ones that I rode, including the BMW GS's. So is it worth the extra money going for the ESA? Absolutely. I think it's fantastic. The shower system's used on lots of bikes now. It's not a huge difference in price, and I think the ESA ones do sell more over the standard variant, particularly in adventure sports mode or variant. Coming up the forks into the electronics, just fantastic. I use Apple CarPlay. I've got a little wireless unit there, and it's very, very, very stable. One peculiarity I have noticed is that when you first turn the bike on, get it all fired up, get it linked up, which takes about 20 seconds or so, whenever you play music, it's a bit crackly for the first maybe 25-30 seconds, and as everything settles down, it becomes absolutely crystal clear. All the cracking stops, all the breaks in interrupting music and stuff all stops, and it becomes very, 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 very stable. So I've had this running for 4 or 5 hours at a time, and it's never dropped out, which ironically is different to when you connect with a cable. With a cable, it does occasionally just drop out of Apple CarPlay. I can't comment on Android version of it because I've got an iPhone. I understand from talking to a few owners it's exactly the same with the Android version as well. So when you first fire the bike up and get it all connected, it's a bit crackly for a few seconds, and then it all sorts itself out. Bit strange, but there you go. Google Maps, which I use, Kalimoto syncs to the screen now faultlessly. Apple Maps works faultlessly. Your music works faultlessly. Just on the topic of the music, you will find sometimes when you first turn the bike on and you were previously playing music, everything will work, all the tones on the bike, all the button pushes all make noise and everything, but your music won't play. But it shows in the screen that it's playing. Bit of a peculiarity, doesn't always do it. All you have to do, rather than reset the bike, is activate Siri and just say Siri play music, and then it all connects again. It's very, very strange. It does it once in a blue moon, doesn't make any difference at all to me. But rather than reset the whole bike and go through the process of connecting all your comms and everything, there's no need to do that. Just use your voice activation and say play music, and it even picks up at exactly the same point it was in the music. So it seems to be more of an issue with connecting your phone rather than a problem with the bike, but it's a non-problem, shall we say. All the rider modes I use, all the suspension adjustments I use, all the trip meters I use, heated grips you'll use. The light modes I don't tend to use. The light modes you control from the function button, so you just pull the function button a couple of times and you use your selectors up and down, and you choose whether you want automatic lights, DRLs, spotlights, dick lights, whichever mode you want, you can choose that. I leave it in auto because it does a far better job and it's something else less to mess around with. The switch gear people talk about, I never have, and I don't think it's a problem. When you use the bike and everything it has, you soon learn where the buttons are. It comes into muscle memory, and it's to me it's a non-problem. I don't agree with people that say the switch gear is a big issue. If you have a bike like this, you should read the manual anyway. It does look intimidating when you first get it, I agree, because there's a lot of buttons. I think it's 16 or something. but they all serve a purpose, and after a couple of months of ownership you think, why would you have any other setup? It's just fantastic for this bike. Cruise control, again, fantastic, use it all the time. It's does exactly what it says on the tin. You can vary the speed using the little flipper up and down. It works between 30 miles an hour and I believe it's 100 miles an hour. So in the real world, whenever you're going to use it realistically, I believe it also doesn't function below third gear in the manual version, but this being a DCT, it's not really an issue. Radar guided cruise control, I think would be an advantage. I hope that comes on subsequent versions of this one. I do agree, having ridden a bike and driven a car with radar guided cruise control, I do get the advantage. So that is the one thing I think this bike would benefit from, would be radar guided cruise. Coming back from the sort of instrument clusters and things, people seem to talk about mirrors. They're fantastic. They show you what's behind you. They're not the biggest mirrors in the world. They are clear. They don't vibrate unless you use D mode. That's one thing I will just drop into. Slight segue there. D mode, I know why it's there. It's so it can pass the emissions test and so it can claim certain miles to the gallon. It feels like the engine's going to grenade when you use it. It vibrates, it rattles, it knocks, it bangs. It's in top gear at 30 miles an hour. I get why it's there, but I've never ever used it other than once or twice just to see if it's really as bad as I remember, and it is that bad. It's shocking. Never used drive mode, use Sport 2. Sport 1's okay, it's not bad at all. It's a good compromise if you're a bit more chilled. Sport 3 gets a bit angry, but if you're having a bit of a play, you can use Sport 3, and it's quite good actually. You'll notice I've got the little Honda tank bag on there. I've got a little non-slip mat on the back of it so it doesn't scratch the tank. It's fantastic, it's really useful. I carry a drink in there and a pair of sunglasses and occasionally a few odds and sods just to stop you disconnecting all the comms and everything and turning the bike off. You just stop, knock the engine off for a second, dive in your bag, do what you want to do and crack on again. So that I think is fantastic. It came with the bike. Fuel tank, range, easy, 300 miles, no problem at all. Even riding it quite aggressively, using all the performance, 300 miles without even a question. If you're taking it easy, you get over 350. The record I've had, and I thought I was pushing my luck with the fuel range a bit because it was down to about 10, was 374. If you really took it easy and really sat on the motorway, I think you could get 400 miles doing 65, 70 miles an hour. So the tank range is brilliant. People say, oh, isn't it heavy? Well, if the weight's a problem for you, you don't have to fill it right up every time. You don't have to do that, guys. If you find the full tank heavy, fill it halfway. You've still got the same range as a standard Africa Twin or any other bike. So I don't accept the argument about the weight of a full tank being a reason not to buy a bike with a big tank. Just don't fill it up all the way. It's just the option's there if you want to. Coming down from the tank, the engine. Now it was a big decision for me in buying the Africa Twin. Was I going to go down by effectively 40 horsepower? You wouldn't think. It's just 101 horsepower. It massively outperforms that. I'm not going to go and say it's because the torque figure's really high. It's not. Whether it's the way it's mapped, whether it's how the power is made, whether it's the crank setup, whether it's the fact it's got a slightly weird firing order, I don't know what it is, but if you rode one of these and someone said it was 100 horsepower, you would not believe it. You'd say it feels like 110, 115 quite comfortably. There's power everywhere from just above tick over. I've never seen it go past 7,000 RPM, so it does seem to tail off a bit towards the top. 2 up, fully loaded. It's great. Use the manual gearbox though if you want to do some overtaking, because sometimes it's a bit hesitant to downshift. So when I do overtakes 2 up, I tend to flip it into manual mode and then do the gearbox manually, which is a lot of fun anyway. The engine though is brilliant, really, really good. From cold, bit clattery. It sounds a bit tappety, is probably the best way I could describe it for the people that know what that means. When I took it in the Honda for the service, I said it's a bit clattery from cold. They said that's very, very normal for that engine. The oil does seem fairly thin in these. I check it every time I ride it as per the manual because I'm a bit OCD about that sort of thing. It's never used any, it's still crystal clear. They are just a bit clattery from cold. After about 2 minutes, Once temperature gauge comes up, it's whisper quiet, it's fine, unlike the new GS. The DCT gearbox, I'm so pleased I chose DCT. I stand by my original statement. I think in the context of this bike and the adventure type bikes, 2-up, fully loaded, off-road for me is not a massive thing. So how it performs off-road was never a factor for me. The DCT is just fantastic. The passengers love it, I love it. I don't think there's any additional cost in maintaining it, i.e., well, haven't you got to replace 2 clutches? Ultimately, yes, but they're only going to wear half as often because you're only using 1 clutch at a time, if that makes sense. I think the DCT is fantastic. Why the GSA has got it now, I think it's because Honda sold so many DCTs and they've all started to come with their own variants. And just to be clear, guys, these are not automatic bikes. It's a manual gearbox which is controlled automatically. It's a very different thing to a slush box or an automatic gearbox. It's got a normal manual gearbox in there with, you know, your 6 ratios. On these, there's no neutral between first and second, so it just goes particularly down the lay shaft. It just drops down the shafts first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth in sequence. So it's not going through neutral. That's how it works as smooth as it does. It's a manual gearbox that's controlled by servo motors. Effectively, on the left-hand side of the engine, you'll see a motor on the end of the gear shaft, and it's a motor turning the gear shaft rather than your foot. It's basically how that end of it works. The right side of the engine is where all your oil flow control valves and all your dual clutches and things are, which is very complicated. But the DCT is fantastic, and I would highly advise anyone that's not ridden a DCT bike, before you judge it, try it. Not just round the corner and say you don't like it because it feels weird. Go for a proper ride, or if you've got a friend or someone or a friendly dealer that says take it out for the day, you'll really start to get it. Now, I wouldn't buy an adventure bike without it. That's how good I think it is. It's just fantastic. The seat, yeah, after you've done a long day, I don't think this goes for any bike. If you're going to do a 300-400 mile day, even more, if you're going to be on the bike 6.5, 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, any bike gets uncomfortable. Is it as comfortable as my Cross Tourer? Yes, but in a different way. The Cross Tourer, when your bum's had enough of it, you just can't even sit on it. It's really uncomfortable. This you can get uncomfortable, but you can move around and you can get a position again where it still works for you, so it's not a huge problem really. Passenger seat is a bit smaller than the Cross Tourer. One bit of feedback I have had is that the rails on the side here and the panniers do interfere with passengers' legs, so if you've got a slightly large passenger, then do take that into account. I've not found it a problem personally. There we go, one of the locals there. Always a pleasure to talk to someone. So we're talking about the seats, weren't we? So yeah, when the passengers on the back, they are closer to you than the Cross Tourer. So if you've got a generously sized passenger, it's not as roomy as a Cross Tourer. It's about the same as any of the GS type options, the Aprilia options. The Ducati's got a smaller seat, I think, but yeah, just take into account if your passenger's got big legs, they might find the panniers just interfering with their legs very slightly. The kids both find that as well, so 1 up, the panniers are not an issue at all. 2 up, just take that into account. So I recommend if you're going to do lots of 2 up touring with the panniers, that you get them to sit on it in their bike gear with the panniers on. Seats adjustable. I run it in the higher option because I'm 6'1". In the lower option it's fine, but I just find your legs get a bit cramped after a while, so I switch into the higher mode, and it's stayed in the higher mode ever since. Really simple to do. Top box is fantastic actually. I take back everything I said about the quality of the luggage in my earlier videos. It's as good as any luggage you can get out there. Whether it's worth a couple of grand that it costs to buy it is a question mark, but the quality is fine, except from it marks so easily. I mean, I look after my bikes fastidiously, really over the top. Even if you rub a boot on this, which this one you always will, if you touch it with a pop or anything, it marks so easily. So one thing I would like to see is that the manufacturers of this luggage, I think it's Givy, if they can produce some sort of vinyl covering or some sort of case that clips over it to keep it unmarked, it'd be really good. Because as soon as even a fingernail, if you wipe it with your fingernail when you're cleaning the bike, you'll scratch it. It's really irritating, but doesn't do any damage. It just doesn't look quite as great. So that is one improvement I would like to see, or certainly offered as an option, is some sort of vinyl protection kit or something to put over the luggage. Very, very useful, very capacious. It is heavy. The mounting system's good, just make sure your little green flashes are showing when you push them in. Really easy to take off, put on. Waterproof as far as I can tell, which is different to the cross tourer luggage because these are top loaders. You can also take the lids off the luggage just by pressing these little press symbols there. You can take the lids off. This one came with all the storm bags, all the liners, everything. So this particular bike, the only things this doesn't have is the foot pedal shifter, which to be fair I'd never use anyway, so that's not a huge loss. And it doesn't have the SC Projects exhaust, which is over 1,200 quid, and I wouldn't personally spend that sort of money on it. If there was one going half price in the Honda dealership, I might go for it just to tick all the boxes really. And I may put the foot shifter on as well at the next service, just so I can say it's fully loaded, it's got everything. And then when it comes to chopping this back in, I can say it's got every single option on it and it's got everything. On the subject of the exhaust, this sounds fantastic. I do not understand how it passed noise regs. When you really wind this on, or if you're in manual mode and you really start to enjoy it, it is actually loud. I'm not going to say it's noisy, it's loud, even compared to some sports bikes. It's a lot of fun, but just be aware that being a big twin, if you go out particularly early in the morning and do lots of nighttime riding, it does make a bit of noise. I think it suits the bike and it's, to be fair, a lot of fun. Pops and bangs, if you want to do that sort of stuff, just knock it down using the manual gearbox, or in certain riding modes it will make a lot of pops and bangs, which is, it's brilliant fun if you're a bit childish like me still. So the exhaust I think is really good. Again, it marks fairly easily. It's starting to stain just through heat. Nothing you can do about that really. It does say in the handbook about polish it straight away every time it starts to mark. How practical is that? I don't know, but I don't think it's completely avoidable. Rear brake, it does stabilise the bike. I have got into this whole thing about having the rear brake slightly on when you go through a slightly tight corner. It does stabilise the bike. I think that's a good tactic. Pad wear minimal at 2,500 miles. I can't see a difference. The chain, yeah, it's one of these things. I understand why it's a chain drive, I do, and every single point as to why it has a chain drive is completely valid, just from a factor of keeping the bike clean and the maintenance side of it. The shaft does have some real advantages. Would I go as far as saying I wish this was shaft drive? Oh, that's a tough one. I think it would add a lot of weight to an already heavy bike, so I wouldn't say it's worth going to a shaft drive. The chain is not that bad. I've only had to adjust it once in nearly 3,000 miles. My chain maintenance is fastidious anyway, but yeah, okay, it does make the bike dirty, as you'd expect if you keep it proper lubed. Actually, on that subject, again, another segue, there seems to be this culture about people not lubing their chains, particularly O or X-ring chains. If you use your bike exclusively in dry weather, exclusively in good weather, I get the school of thought, okay? I think a lot of it is because people want to keep their bikes immaculately clean and they want to do all the, you know, no marking from chain lube or anything, and don't like a dirty chain. I get that. I get the argument about the O and X ring sealing the oil in there or the lubricant in there. I get that. I think there's some argument to it. As long as you clean your chain and then lube it, I personally, based upon my experience of 30 odd years of riding bikes, would recommend you lube your chain, but just don't go nuts with it, because some people see empty half a can on the thing. You don't need to, it's just going to fly off. I tend to do lube my chain when it's warm, so just after you get back from a ride. I've got a rag at home and I carry one in the toolbox that's soaked in WD-40. Pass any comments you want on that, it's up to you. Wipe the chain around, spray the lube on it, and it all soaks in while it's nice and warm. The next time you cool it down, it seems to cut down the spray, but you're never going to completely cut it out. Working around the bike, the lights are incredible. It's LEDs all around, you've got your DRLs, you've got your angel eyes, and the light control unit does a far better job than I do of switching between the various modes. It turns daytime into a safe riding environment because you've got your DRLs and the light switch between the modes as you go under various trees and things. Nighttime is a thing of the past. When you have these lights, nighttime is a thing that's an environment around you. When you're looking in front of you, it's as good as day. The lights are just incredible, absolutely fantastic. And going back to my Blade, it seems like the lights aren't working after riding this. Really, really, really fantastic lights, absolutely incredible. In summary then, am I happy with my choice? 100%. Am I going to keep it to 4 years? That's a question mark. There's lots of rumours flying around about a new Blackbird coming out, being a 1300. If that is as good as it could potentially be, then yeah, okay, that's something I might take a look at. But do I think this is worth £21,500 as this stands in front of you? If you had £21,500 in your bank, that's a good question. That's a decision you have to make. In terms of PCP, I pay $240 a month on this. I think it's worth every penny. Do I think it's the best bike ever built? That's a really tough one. It depends on what context you're looking at. You can't compare it to sports bikes and sports tourers. I still wave the flag for the Blackbird. I still hold by that is the best all-round bike ever built, taken out of the whole off-road thing, because that's just not something that's really a factor for me. If you don't do off-road, I still stand by the argument that Blackbird is still the best bike ever built, particularly in terms of quality. Unrivaled. I'm happy to take all the heat in the comments. I won't have any variants. Anyone that's ever worked on a Blackbird, including Honda Techs, will tell you the same thing. The Blackbird is the pinnacle in terms of quality. This isn't in the same field. I think for what I use it for, it was the correct choice. It does, however, have one big problem, and this is where, getting back to my Fireblade, weird tangent comes to. I don't love this. I've tried. I can't think of a reason why. I can't justify it. I can't quantify it. I do not love this bike. I respect it massively in the same way you respect any piece of modern technology, any piece of equipment, be it a MacBook, be it anything you want to sort of compare. You know, the sort of tangent I'm trying to make is that there is no reason you can really criticise this. It doesn't do anything wrong. It doesn't do anything differently in the way it should do. I just don't love it. I just don't love it, particularly when compared to my Fireblade. And the reason why I still have this is because I have my Fireblade. It's the polar opposite to this. It is diametrically, in every possible way, completely opposite to this. When I've had enough of this, when the electronics wind me up, when the rider modes wind me up, when the weight of it winds me up, when the size of it winds me up, when the sheer complexity of it winds me up, and it does sometimes, I jump on the Blade. It's fantastic. It's got nothing on it. It is just literally bare basic. And after riding the Blade again, I think, oh, I really fancy getting back on the AT because it's comfortable. It's, you know, it's very different. Had I not had the Blade, I would have taken this back and I would have probably gone for something else. So having the Blade has saved me having this bike. If I didn't have the Blade, I probably would have taken it back after 3 months and said, as much as it's fantastic, it's not for me. Let's have a conversation about that one in the comments, guys, and see if you get what I'm saying. So there you go. That's my 6-month kind of review on the Africa Twin. Any questions you've got? If you completely wildly disagree, happy to discuss it. Just don't get abusive. And I hope you found this useful in some way. Thanks, guys.